Hi folks, and welcome back to the allotment. Look at this, my latest Facebook Marketplace bargain find. A little bit of plywood, which means today we're hopefully going to be completing the last major bit of work on the shed rebuild. Now for the shed rebuild, I went with quite a fancy premium kind of pre-built shed, but I've been trying to outfit it on the cheap. I've been trying to cut costs where I can and sort of do things the allotment way. And I'd kind of resigned myself to just going to a hardware store and buying some plywood. It was gonna cost about 30 quid though. And I saw these on Marketplace yesterday. I was actually looking for paving slabs, but I saw these plywood offcuts and they're really, really good quality. They got a few little dinks and nicks, but for a kind of work surface, they're gonna be absolutely fine. They were only 3 quid each for about 30 centimeters by 1.2 meters. There's lots of instructional videos out there on how to build kind of freestanding shelves and that sort of thing for sheds. This is not an instructional video. This is going to be an idiot trying to kind of fumble his way through. And the first problem with the ply is that it's not quite the right size for what I'd started building out as the support structure for this worktop. Setting the scene, you can see this is the first support here. And we've now got a gap over this side because I was planning on cutting it a little bit longer. So we can't have this gap. So we've got to figure something out. Probably going to rebuild the structure just to bring this on the inside, and that should do fine. The main method of support for this worktop is going to be this piece, which just goes across the shed uprights and is just screwed in. This will be able to take an awful lot of weight, but obviously we do need support for the corners and the sides so that the ply doesn't sag. It's about 15mm ply, it's pretty strong, but we do need some freestanding legs. And the really unusual thing about this build is that I will then want to continue the worktop into like a strip along here. It's only going to be about 25 centimeters off this wall, and that's because it's right in front of the doorway there. So we don't want to block the doorway, but we just want to use this space a little more effectively, have a little place to sit, more storage, more surface area to put stuff down, to cover with rubbish. So after a bit of thinking, instead of sitting the ply on this, I'm actually going to use this more of as a support platform to put things on, because I just think it's going to make life so much easier. Otherwise, you have to try and get lots of accurate level surfaces, kind of building things into this leg, which is just very difficult. And as I'm taking this apart now anyway, because then all you need to do is put things on here. I've got to move this in a little bit to match the ply. Let's just rest it here and see how the measurements work. It does mean it will be a little taller, which is not the end of the world, but this is just going to make life much easier, I think, having it on here like this. One thing I will need to do today is lots of cutting out. So I've brought up the jigsaw to cut out recesses. So this will push right back and we'll have a nice flush finish. One thing it will mean is that the back will need a little plugging to support the back of this ply here. I did check before I did this, I had some scrap wood that matched this diameter, so I can put a couple of blocks in here and that will just support it. I've just taken this long piece out, and it's tricky working with scrap wood because a lot of things are slightly different dimensions, but this one matches this one over here just perfectly, which means if this is perfectly level, which it is, and this one is perfectly level, we can run this from here with some leg supports all the way to the end here. Obviously it needs cutting to size, but I do think this is a much easier way of doing things. Now that we've got this level surface and we can just put things on top of it, so long as all the pieces of wood are the same size and dimensions, we know we've got a nice level surface to work off. We can of course also put a piece along here and then support that with a corner sort of 45-degree angle bracket underneath, which I will do, and that means I'll be able to have a lot of space under the desk there without a leg in the middle to support it, which means it will just be a bit easier to sit in there if I want to. Now, one of the things about this build, it is kind of janky. I don't have like a separate work area. I'm just trying to do it in the shed. So it's a little bit cramped, but we got that piece cut to size with nice and level on the legs, and then it was just a case of drawing out the little recesses for the ply. But the work area had to be fixed first because it was wobbling around all over the place, so I just secured this leg. It's not perfect, but it held up enough for me to get the jigsaw out and start work on those cuts. This is the part I'm slightly nervous about because it requires at least a modicum of precision. It doesn't matter if there's a few gaps up around here, but we want it to fit quite nice. So I have brought up the jigsaw today. We're going to try and cut out these pieces. Now, if I'm honest, I'm not very experienced when it comes to joinery. This is pretty much the first time I've used a jigsaw. I don't have a coping saw, which would be perfect to make that horizontal cut in here. And I was a little bit nervous about the plyboard and how to really make this cut efficiently. And the first one, I made a bit of a hash out of. I went in diagonally, but straight into the corner, which obviously then left me with this kind of like weird triangle that I had to try and fix. I figured out in future, all you need to do is you go to that bottom corner, but you take a curved line, and then you end up with enough gap to be able to get your jigsaw in and make a really nice clean finish. But you know, this first one, yes, it was butchered, but it didn't work out too badly in the end. I am someone who prides themselves not on workmanship or ability or talent, but definitely on perseverance. And after a little while, it's not perfect, it's pretty janky, but we are very close to getting this in. And if I'm honest, this has gone slightly better than I was expecting. This one, really, really nice on there, actually. This one, good on that side, not so great on that side, bit of a gap there. And over here, I've just taken a little much off, but this is slotted in quite nicely, all things considered, and we've got the start of the worktop. It is nice and level in both directions as well. So this is the next piece that needs to go on. It's currently far too wide, so I don't want the top to be this deep, and it isn't supported. I'll show you underneath. And you can see how much overhang there is here, so all of this is excess that I need to cut off, and I was very clever. I have actually done something clever. I've designed it so the depth is perfectly in line with this upright, so I don't have to do any more complex joinery. Can just cut a piece that is exactly this width and it will slot just in there, and then these bits of ply will kind of be screwed into the supports underneath. So it's coming together pretty well. Now the next cut is to reduce the width of the table, and it required quite a lot of precision, and the only tool I have for this is a free-handed kind of circular saw, so I was quite nervous about this one. Hopefully that is perfect. I'm really, really pleased with this. I apologise, the lighting is slightly tricky to tell. I'm slightly disappointed with myself. The one mistake I've made, I should have checked this piece a little more carefully and figured out that this was going to be the side facing up, because where these two join, it is a really nice straight cut, so there's no gap between there or anything, but that finish is a little rough, so maybe I will need to paint this or give it something just to neaten it up a little bit. So the back piece, really, really strong, really supported nicely at the back and the two sides. This piece though, currently, I'm putting pretty much all my weight on that. This is pretty strong, but it does flex a little, and if I have really heavy stuff on this, it might sag over time. So I will put in a support under there. But next up is cutting a little piece for this side, and you can see we just need to cut one piece. It'll sit mostly on here. Can you imagine how perfect it would be if this offcut fit just right? But you can see that's not deep enough. But this one will have support mainly from this, which is resting on legs, and then I'll tap some bits into here for it to sit on as well. The next thing was just getting that central support in the right place, making sure it was all nice and plumb, securing the leg, and then I'm sitting there just to check the height of the desk, and this really is very high. It's not something you can sit at, but that central support is still very loose. It moves around a lot, so I've just used a little 45-degree angle there to kind of secure it into the shed wall, so it's going to be really nice and solid. And then, moment of truth, cutting the ply down to size. This is another nervous one. Thankfully, I did buy extra ply because I thought I would make a mistake, but luckily I didn't need to use it. This is the cut that I figured out, thankfully. You do the two cuts first, and then you come in at a bit more of an angle. Took a few goes, but you can get a decent angle on that, and then you can get the jigsaw in and just cut along that bottom cut line. So, time for moment of truth number 2. It looks okay from here. Oh yes, perfect. That is very good. It's obviously still too wide. This is too deep. Although I could put a little angle on it like that, coming into the door. I'm not sure. It's currently not supported at the back, so it's falling down. Let me support this, and then we'll get a little bit of a sense of whether or not this needs trimming. The idea was to cut this all the way along here, but it might not need it. Not sure. We'll get a feel for if it's taking up too much room or not. To support this, I'm just going really simple. I'm just popping some things into the upright here to take a little bit of the weight. This one is just a little shelf, it's not going to need much support. And just 2 screws into the framing. Solid. So it's been about 10 or 15 minutes. Did some awkward fiddly stuff and I couldn't get the camera in the right place to film, but I think we're nearly there. I'm pretty happy with this. You can see originally I'd sort of planned to cut it all off here, but I thought let's put a little cut on here, see how it looks, see if it feels like it's taking up too much space, and I think it's perfect, isn't it? Doesn't that just look really nice? I'm really pleased. This is a warts and all channel, so I'll show you all the mistakes and things I'm not so happy with. The first thing, bits like this, you know, where I've just not thought about the bits of ply that I'm using. I'm a little concerned about this, sort of in terms of longevity, getting wet or moisture, or if there's condensation in the shed. So I think I would like to paint these and maybe properly seal them. And I might do that before I screw them all in. So they're pretty stable right now, but if I put weight in the wrong place, it's going to tip over. So they do need securing in, but a few screws will stop that. I think it probably makes sense to treat them or paint them with something so that if they do get wet, they're not going to swell up and deform, which is the real issue with this kind of material. So any tips, anything that you've used, please do let me know in the comments. Had a little bit of fiddly stuff with the door, and I was a little bit worried about this kind of causing a problem, but you can see here, completely fine. I can shut the door nicely. I don't really use this lock because it's a key. I just leave it open on the allotment so people don't think there's stuff in here to nick. The only other, I would say this is minor. There is a small gap along here. You can kind of shift it up, but then it makes a gap at the back. So it's not completely perfect. I could, if I was a real perfectionist, get some wood filler in there or something like that, but that is so over the top for a shed like this. These two have come together fairly nicely. There's no gap or anything on here. This sits slightly higher, but I think once that's screwed into the frame, it should be okay. The other thing I want to do is just quickly take that off, just so, you know, if I'm bending over or whatever, I won't poke my eye out. And before I do that, let's get a little support in here. And really, there's a couple of options for supporting this. You can see it's just going to sag slightly in the middle, and I could put a long piece of timber all the way from here into this bar. That would support it. Something like this would do quite nicely, but I don't quite have the right length of timber. I've got some really chunky pieces I could cut down to size, but basically I just think it's overkill. It's probably not necessary, so what I'll do, take a piece like that, put it underneath, cut this to size, and then use a corner piece like I've done elsewhere. And that will just support this center and stop it from sagging. In an ideal world, this would have been made out of one piece of wood and we wouldn't have this join, but that's really where I saved the money, so I'm not too upset about it. Just put a little angle on that once again, just so that, I don't know, if I'm sitting under here or my knee catches it or anything, I don't want to crack it on a corner. I call this a corner brace. I don't really know what it is. It's like two 45-degree angles on a bit of wood. And if you put that on an upright, it just gives it so much strength. It's been really successful and so easy so far. We do have one other slight issue, and that is this leg. Currently it's just got a screw in the top, basically, going down into it, so it can kind of wobble around a little bit. So I'm just going to put a little corner brace in here, a tiny little one. Look a little bit like that, and that will just hold it in place and stop it from wobbling around if I kick it or something like that. Oh dear, that's not great. It's not awful. It could be worse. That's fine, that'll do. It's a shame I made a hash out of that corner, but generally I'm really pleased with this. Like I say, please do let me know in the comments if you've got any suggestions. If you would have done it differently, let me know in a polite way. I'm always open to constructive criticism, but I've got an intrusive thought at the moment. There's something in the back of my head telling me that I need to test this. You know, I need to see like how much weight can it actually take, and for some reason I'm feeling the need to see if this can take the weight of a human. So let's find out. Oh, I'm a little nervous now, actually. Oh, look at that. Solid as a rock. This is perfect. This is really, really solid. That's pretty good considering it's not even screwed into the supports. So thank you ever so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was at least entertaining seeing me blunder my way through it. Hopefully I'll see you again in the next one. An extra special thank you to all of my Chili Pepper tier patrons: Tony, Bill, Pam, Mel, Michael, Socks, Dorcasaur, Louise, Andre, Brett, Tom and Amber. Hopefully I'll see you again next time, folks.